Senator, it's great to have you on the show again. I've mapped out this eerie parallel between what the WEF want and what your government are doing. Are you at all concerned by all of this?
Well, Corey, thanks for having me on. Look, the first thing I'd say is anytime you mention the world's WEF or the letters WEF, World Economic Forum, I do get nervous. And some of the concepts you talked about there before certainly are worrying. And so, look, I do have some reservations about the bill, and that's why it's good that it's out there in an exposure draft. It's good that we get the opportunity for people to comment on it and talk about it. But look, the concept of having all of people's information, all of the data that's involved here, and we're talking about things like medical care, purchasing habits, potentially, real estate transactions, all of those things wrapped up in one data file, which potentially, I suppose, could be given to corporations for sale. And most importantly, I think, could be available for hackers to hack into. I mean, we've seen example after example of that when we've been told that the bureaucracies can look after our data. QR codes going missing, of course, in a number of states in Australia over the last couple of years. There are some very, very important and very concerning points that come out of this. And I think there's a lot to be unpacked. It's a very complicated piece of legislation. It's a very complicated concept. But at the end of the day, I want to be sure that we're not giving too much power and control to these corporates that are in bed with the WEF, that with their agenda, and particularly with unelected UN bureaucrats who are pulling these strings. So this needs to be dealt with in a very careful and very considered manner.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also recognise that cybersecurity is critically important for individuals. We don't want identity theft and things of that nature. But private enterprise has been doing a pretty good job in this, and you're actually siloing everything by dealing with different individual companies. So why does government feel the need that they've got to be tracking and almost everything that we do, even though they say they won't? That's how it's going to end up, isn't it? They're going to be looking at everything we do, everything we sign into, and who knows where that will lead. I've just followed the thread where I think it could deliver us.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. People always talk about that. If it's good enough for banks dealing in billions, if not trillions of dollars, this sort of security, then what's the issue? But this goes deeper into deeper issues, I suppose. And it sort of ties back into themes that are all around our community at the moment, this concept of really sacrificing privacy for convenience. We see that all the time with all of the apps we've got at the moment, some of which are harvesting data, some of which are not. Some of the tools that are around, we don't really know what they're doing, the Siris and the Google apps and all that sort of thing. So, convenience is not always the best answer here. Sometimes you've got to look to what it's actually doing and what it's actually going to be used for, even if you haven't considered that at the moment. You've got to be able to look down the barrel and say, I don't want to be in a situation in this country where government of any make and model can turn off and freeze bank accounts like happened in Canada a couple of weeks ago, or indeed like we see in China with this social credit scheme, where if you're caught and your biometric data it doesn't match up when you cross the road and you get a fine, your social credit score goes down, and that impacts whether you can get a mortgage. It impacts whether or not you can take a train ticket. So these things, I mean, they sound far-fetched and fanciful. They sound dystopian, but they're already happening in other parts of the world. And just by the way, Corey, right here in our home state of South Australia, the SA Health bureaucrats already are trialling a system tied around, once again, this Trojan horse of COVID compliance, which is the home quarantine app, which does exactly the things we've been talking about, taking your facial data, if you're home quarantining, the GPS data, cross-matching it, and then sending it back to the bureaucrats 3 or 4 times a day to tell them that you're at home where you say you should be. Now, if people aren't worried about this sort of stuff, then they really need to be, I'm afraid.